Okay, we're in here. Back here. What were we talking about? A domain controller, Ldap, Active Directory. So Active Directory is a specialized database for that hosts objects that are specifically Windows objects for easier manageability and easier security, administration of Windows systems. So if you care about security, you need to use Active Directory. And if you have a Windows environment, which most enterprise environments are Windows environments, and I'm saying that the end users are using Windows, you got to use Active Directory, whether it's Azure AD or Microsoft Active Directory. So Ldap, which is Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, I believe. Isn't it that? Let's look that up. Hold on. Let me check and double check my linguistics on that one. Yes. Okay. So I was right. Occasionally that, IT is alphabet soup, people. So it's so many different. There's so many different acronyms and just things in it that you got to remember all these arbitrary protocols and different ways they call them and different pronunciations. And so just think about it. IT itself is an acronym. The industry is an acronym. So Ldap, check it out, is an open, vendor neutral. Those two things are vastly different from Active Directory. Active Directory is not open. It's not vendor neutral. Active Directory is vendor specific. Industry standard application protocol for maintaining distributed directory information services over intranetwork protocol. So Ldap lets you interface with Active Directory. So the best way I can explain this is to really give you a practical example. So when I worked in an MSP environment, and I've noticed a lot of MSPs do this, when they set up Meraki devices or the firewalls that Meraki has, I think they're MX series firewalls, they set up Ldap, so they'll install Ldap on the server, and then they will point to the Ldap server from the Meraki or the firewall, whatever you're using, so that user database and user account and authentication and identity stuff can be managed by Active Directory. So what that lets you do is if you have employees that need to use VPN, then you can force them to authenticate through Active Directory before they can VPN and use the VPN tunnel that your organization has. It also gives, this is kind of creepy, it also gives organizations the ability to identify who's using what machine. So if if the employee's using a company-owned machine, they can track the login, they can track, account for it and say, what are they doing? What have they done? So have you ever heard of AAA? Not the insurance agency, but the framework. It's like a framework of thinking, really. Authentication, authorization, and accountability. So remember the 3 A's. When you look at Active Directory and you think about security and you think about Ldap, think about authentication, authorization, and accountability. So authentication, and this brings us to our topic of authentication here, is you can get on the system, right? You're able to log in, right? Or if let's think about if you're an employee at a big company, you can get in the building, you can authenticate. Authorization is how far you can get, right? So there's companies around me I've visited, talked to hiring managers there, had lunch with them, and I had guest access, so I was authenticated. They might have created me a guest account in AD and tied that to my guest badge, and I swiped, and those machines authenticate. Because even security access, like I'm talking physical access systems like key card readers and biometric systems, they tie back to Active Directory a lot of the time. To track that, it makes it much easier to track and account for users, right? And you know, to me, it's software. So somebody asked in the chat, so is LDAP hardware or software? It's software. It's a protocol. So yeah. So to me, you know, when we talk about Active Directory, we are talking about, you know, managing users. We're talking about identifying and accounting for users and really controlling access to resources. So that Active Directory kind of gives us a really, you know, I'm going to say simple way to do this. Now, overall, Active Directory can be a monster to manage in a big organization, but generally speaking, it's pretty easy to use. Okay. So here we go. So we're going through the process of installing roles. So you notice when I clicked on this, I hit add roles and features. And from there, let me move this up. You know, you go through the wizard, and you know, do you ever read the wizards, people? You should read this. This tells you good information, right? Well, keyboard. So somebody asked in the chat, is LDAP a way to enable logging and auditing? Yes, for devices that aren't normally connected to Active Directory or don't natively have that built in. LDAP can be almost like a compatibility for that application to interface with Active Directory. So, yeah. Yeah, no, you're good. So anytime you have a question, please ask it, whether it's in the chat or in the comments below. I know that this is going to be a VOD, but I understand the format of our live stream is live, like we're talking to each other. So, you know, I think that can make for a better VOD. So never feel bad for asking questions if you have them. If I don't know them, hopefully somebody else in the chat does. Okay, so I will tell you if I don't know, but if I do know and I've had experience with it, I'll answer to the best of my ability. So never hesitate to ask questions on this stream. I think questions are a great thing for learning. So what's next? Okay, so check this out. This wizard helps you install roles, role services, or features. You determine which roles, role services, or features to install based on computing needs of your organization, such as sharing documents or hosting a website. To remove roles, role services, or features, you can go to the role removal wizard. And we're in a wizard, okay? This is a wizard, Harry, right? You know, I'm talking, hey, you're a wizard, Harry. This is a wizard right here. I'm telling you, he can't believe it because he grew up in a underneath the staircase. Okay, so yeah, so occasionally I go on these weird rants, and I'm a weird person. So if you're new and it's bothering you, I am weird. Okay, so before you continue, verify the following tasks have been completed. The administrator account has a strong password. Network settings such as a static IP address are configured. Hey, I was talking about this the other day. Last time we talked about all these are the most ideal things. And I've got to say, last lesson, I did not run Windows updates because on stream, that takes too long. Nobody wants to, and nobody got time for that. Okay, nobody got time to watch Windows update. Okay, but static IP, good. Strong password, good. Okay, so another thing, one of the people in the community, Keyboard, he brought up a good point about passwords. He said you probably want to have this password stored somewhere where only the most trusted individuals know where it is and know it, right? Because this is a really important password. The very first account on a Windows Server system is the built-in, or not the built-in, but the default initial administrator account, which has local admin rights to the server. And then once you install Active Directory, and like we're going to do in Domain Controller, the local admin account becomes a domain administrator, which if you've done anything on Hack the Box, you've heard anything about ethical hacking in a Windows environment, the attackers are always trying to get to domain admin. Because if they're the domain admin, they rule the land and it's over for you. Right, so let's go next, okay? So continue next. Look, role-based or feature-based install is what we're going to do. But I also want you to know this. Look, remote desktop services installation. So install required role services for virtual desktop infrastructure to create a virtual machine-based or session-based desktop deployment. This is something we may want to explore. I've seen hospitals do this, and you know, for some reason, no, I actually know. I know the reason now that I'm thinking about it. The reason a lot of healthcare providers go VDI is because basically what you're doing is you're turning the end user's hardware into a terminal where they just access a VM that's their desktop. What does that let you do? That lets you essentially manage like a golden image of Windows and not have to worry about the user adding this and that and, you know, getting viruses and stuff. You don't have to worry about it not being HIPAA compliant or it adhering to certain compliance bodies and standards, because you control all that. So, of course, you have to make sure you set it up to be, you know, compliant to the appropriate standards and the appropriate standards bodies. But having it on your own infrastructure makes that a lot easier. So VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, is essentially a user's desktop infrastructure running on a server, just going back to the days of, you know, terminal mainframe. So it's kind of going back that way with VDI. But security buffs and security experts out there are a fan of VDI because it gives them full control of how the desktop changes, really. Right? So we're not doing remote desktop services right now. We're doing Active Directory. So we need to pick a role. So I'm going to go next. And, you know, if I had a bunch of servers, this utility, the add roles and features wizard, Harry, would allow us to do this remotely. Like, this would allow us to connect to other servers and install roles remotely on those servers. So it has a very DevOps-ish philosophy behind it. Now, I don't want to disturb the force with any of those out there who are DevOps centric and their jobs DevOps centric, but I do think this allows for more automation, I will say, in a Windows environment. So Microsoft, sometimes you don't need third-party tools, people. Sometimes it's there in Windows, you just got to look for it, right? You got to read and look, hey, what does Windows do? Go on Google, does Windows allow me to do this? How do I do this in Windows, right? And here's a good one to Google. How do I install a role remotely on a Windows server inside of Windows Server? I don't know, using Server Manager, and it will come up with something, I promise. Microsoft, they want you to use their products, and you're already paying for this, right? So whether you bought it with the hardware, you bought the license for server separately, you're paying for this. And this is where this right here, these roles, and this is on-prem, right? So this is not in the cloud, but I will tell you that there is still a need for on-prem skills and to manage on-prem systems. I promise you, look it up. You can Google system administration jobs, and it'll pull it up in your area, whether it's on Monster or Google or Indeed or LinkedIn. It'll show you the jobs. And that's one of the best ways really to find what skills you need to learn and what to build your learning lab based off of, is look at the job description you want and look at the skills they're asking for, right? So, and then build that lab environment that you think is how they use it, right? And you get to learn it more and more. So this is awesome. This is like a one-stop shop for services that you can in roles that you can put on this server. And really what a role is a service that the the server will become. And by the way, I have a whole talk on this that I'll give quickly right now, but the difference between a client and a server is not a hardware thing. So a lot of people, when they hear server, they think of this data center. They think of like the most powerful computer in the entire universe. But in reality, a server is just servicing a request, while a client is requesting a service. You can think of the restaurant analogy where, you go to a restaurant, a sit-down restaurant, and you are a client and you request an item on the menu, and then the server services it to you, or delivers it to you. So Active Directory has a service, and the first service we're going to install within Active Directory is the Active Directory domain service. So click that, and this, it says, hey, there's some extra features for management. Do you want to add those, right? Like the directory module for Windows PowerShell. So PowerShell, if you don't know what that is, and we should do some PowerShell in this series, is command line based configuration. So think if you like Linux and you're into Bash, or you like Ansible, think like PowerShell is that natively in Windows. It's like a shell language. It's I don't want to call it a programming language because it's not. It's more of like a command line interface for Windows environments. In PowerShell, Microsoft is obviously, they believe in the power of PowerShell, so they're building functionality into the cloud systems like Office 365. You can add mailboxes, change permissions, shared calendar stuff. You can do that in PowerShell. What does that help? You're like, who cares? Some people are like, why would I learn command line? Well, I strongly encourage you to learn command line. I'm not against it. I do use GUIs, and you can make fun of me for that, but and I give you full permission to do that. You can call me a GUI baby, but I like both. I like the command line as well, but the command line is much more automatable, if that's a word. You can automate tasks through the command line through steps and commands. So if you think about a script, yes, I know you can get into Python, you can get into Go and all these programming languages to write scripts, but in the most basic form, a script is just a step-by-step commands, right? So if you're just doing an install of one system, you can just have commands just execute, or that are inputted one after the other, or sequentially in the proper order. And if you know that, and if you've gone through that manually, you can automate that. And to me, I'll say if you're looking at automating anything, it starts with documenting it first, right? So whatever the process is, document as much as you can about it. And then you can learn, oh, that's the service that's running. Oh, what the service needs to run for me to do this remotely and for me to do this through PowerShell. And then you can start Googling. You don't even have to invent the script. Because if you think about how widespread Windows is, the PowerShell script probably already exists, okay? It probably already exists out there. So if you're thinking of, whatever it is and you want to do it, Google it. Say, how do I do this in PowerShell? I don't know. How do I delete files off of multiple computers using PowerShell? So in the labs I manage at the college I work at, there's about 60 computers I manage. They're all Windows. And, when I want to delete a file, because I'll run scripts that install programs on multiple computers at once. If I want to delete a file that didn't get deleted, I can run a PowerShell command from my Instructor station or from my, management station, and it'll delete them on every computer as long as I just specify where that is. So PowerShell is powerful, right? So we hit add features, Active Directory domain services. Let's go next. We're not going to add any of these features right now, but just know that it can do a lot. So again, this is where I think Windows Server shines, is they give you kind of like this package of things that are just check boxes to make that server do what it does, right? So it does take some configuration, don't get me wrong, but the install process is very simple. So next, this is foreshadowing, people. So if we look at this is kind of getting to the point where we're about to confirm, but let's read this. Look, Active Directory Domain Services stores information about users, computers, and other devices on the network. ADDS helps administrators securely manage this information and facilitates resource sharing and collaboration between users. Things to note: to help ensure that users can still log on the network in the case of a server outage, install a minimum of 2 domain controllers for a domain. So you should have a backup domain controller, and we'll talk about that. When we get to disaster recovery, we're going to definitely do a backup domain controller. So then there's ADDS requires a DNS server to be installed on the network. If you do not have a DNS server installed, you will be prompted to install a DNS server role on this machine. So when we promote this thing to a domain controller, this will become our primary DNS server on the network. Here's the big one right here, because this is one of the things we're going to get to in one of the lessons, is when we connect it to the cloud. So Azure Active Directory. Does anybody know what Azure is? Let me know in the chat. Let me know in the comments. Tell others. Teach others what you know about Azure, because Azure is the future of Microsoft's infrastructure. Their servers that they sell, everything, right? So I don't know if we're going to buy software anymore. Like as sysadmins, I think we're going to buy access to it. If you look at the consumer world at all, that look at all the software or all the digital products you use. There's a lot of them that you don't really download to your computer or download to your environment anymore. You stream them, whether it's like a Netflix or Disney Plus or Hulu, whatever, or Spotify. All that's being streamed. You don't own it. You're paying for access to it. So this is like Azure is the competitor to AWS. Yes. So Keyboard says Azure is the Microsoft infrastructure as a service product to compete with AWS. Yes, correct. Right. So I'm telling you, this is going to the cloud. And they've built, look at this, they've built an Azure Active Directory Connect. So we will be able to connect our Azure Active Directory install to, our Active Directory install to Azure. And that way it'll give us an ability to have cloud capabilities. Some of the things that you can enable when you connect to Azure and when you connect to cloud and some of these cloud services, you can start doing 2-factor authentication, where when someone logs in, they also have to type in a code because they have they get a text, or they open an authenticator app. Microsoft has an authenticator app that's like having a hardware token or in a software token that the number changes and is much more secure than even text-based 2-factor authentication. So there's a lot of things that Azure gives you. For you developers out there, I'm looking at how Azure is allowing people to incorporate more of Microsoft's machine learning technology into their workloads, into their databases, into their environments. I'm even seeing some people out here doing projects where they're connecting Raspberry Pis to Azure to enable their robot to have image recognition. So because it's using ML and some software, I don't know much about machine learning, but that's another route that this could go when you connect to the cloud. Because the cloud can move much faster than the enterprise. And I know you want to see the install, but I also want to talk about the theory is when you're connecting to the cloud, you're connecting to a system that Microsoft has full control over and that they can update, tomorrow if they want to, without asking for permission or without needing to push out an update to millions of machines, right? So when you think about cloud practically, it makes sense. It's a good business idea it's a good engineering idea because if you're just connected to the cloud and that's where your core feature set is, then when Microsoft updates or comes out with a new feature or a new security fix, a patch, they just do it because it's their environment, right? For you, and in an on-prem environment, you got to pull the update down. You got to have a patch management strategy. And I think if you have on-prem and if you're managing your own infrastructure at all, like if you even have VMs in the cloud, you should have a patch management strategy, like a way that weekly you do updates, right? Yeah. So Keyboard says about cloud and Azure, you are outsourcing the physical security and personnel security and security at the lower levels to the cloud service provider. Yeah. So if you look at it exclusively from a security perspective, now Microsoft's responsible for most of that. But if it's a VM, you have responsibility there. They're not gonna secure the OS for you as it is inside of their environment. Now the hardware layer, yeah. Their data centers, yeah. I mean, you're not getting in their data centers unless you work there, right? Some of these cloud providers literally have armed guards. Like they pay these security units out there, to guard their data centers. So interesting in terms of a physical security perspective. Power wise, you're going to be using less power. Your power bill is probably going to be lower. But anyways, this is Azure. We're going to go towards Azure. So after we've got Active Directory established and those skills in a good place, we are going to sync our AD on-premises server in our scenario to Azure. So let's go next. And then this is just basically confirmation. It does require a restart. So we're going to do that. And I'm going to hit install. So right now, what's happening? AD is, or this wizard is installing Active Directory domain services. So it's putting a service in place. It's building the framework for Active Directory. It's really not putting the database together yet until we do what's called a promotion to a domain controller. So we've got this install going. Some of y'all are like, if you're new here, welcome. I'm Bob. I'm teaching some Sys Admin stuff. We got some others teaching in the chat too, talking about how they use their systems and explaining a little bit about their experience with system administration. But this is like a basic fundamental skill. This is like, how, I don't know wherever you live, in what country you live in, everybody, but in the United States, we have like standardized curriculum in public schools, right? And, that standardized curriculum, is important for, I guess, your skills in life. I mean, it's debatable here. It's a big debate in the States, but the reason I mention it is, I would say if you're a sysadmin and you're doing Windows stuff, this is one of those things that should be a part of the core curriculum. If you're going through university and you're learning IT stuff, like even if it's help desk, system and network administration, you should learn Active Directory. I even think developers should learn it if they're going to be in a Windows environment at all. Because it's just good to know that it's there, and it's good to know what it's used for. So for those of you that work in an IT department, you can probably speak for this. You use Active Directory. So what is it used for? Let me put a practical example, right? So let's pull up our scenario just so we have a visual, right? Okay, so let's say, we got the network in place, we got the servers up, we got the PCs ready, and we are going to set up a Windows 10 PC. Is with the Active Directory, you and your team, so you're creating the account, or your help desk support team is doing it. When a new employee starts, they're going to have an account on the network, meaning they're going to have an identity on the network that can be tracked, traced, and managed, right? And you can secure that, but you can, so that when someone new starts, HR typically has this onboarding process that they follow. And up until a certain point, there's going to be a checklist item that is create all like IT accounts. One of those, and probably the very first one, is going to be Active Directory. I've got a contact, great guy. He works in cloud. He's a security consultant, super intelligent. I've been wanting to get him on here to just chat. He calls Active Directory a source of truth for a lot of organizations. So that's kind of what they build everything around, is Active Directory. So the big companies, everybody has an Active Directory account, and everything gets built around that. So what access they have to what buildings, what access they have to what folders and printers that they can print from, and networks they can connect to. So it can be managed really well. And if something goes wrong, like let's say we get a rogue employee who accesses something that they shouldn't access, and the IT department may be able to tie that back to their account in Active Directory because Windows has logs, right? Yeah, it does. It pretty much does. On the identity and authentication side, no holds barred, Active Directory's there. Yeah, it's like a fundamental technology. So promote this server to a domain controller. There's a link right here. Hit boom. Yeah. So here we go. Look, add a new forest, right? So look at these three options. Add a domain controller to an existing domain. So if we were creating a backup domain controller, which we will eventually do, that's what we would do there. If we were adding a new domain to an existing forest, so maybe if you've grown huge. No, most organizations don't need multiple domains, but I will say, let's think about this. So in our scenario with Twitch Institute of Technology, we're going to have faculty and we're going to have students. It may make sense to have a separate domain altogether for students than for faculty and staff and like people that work there. So we can add a new forest. That's what we're going to do from scratch. So a forest is the top level name. It's what connects to all your domains. It's kind of like the backbone of your Active Directory structure. It is your forest. And when you get into multiple domain setups, forests start to make a whole lot more sense. But just know, when you are building your very first domain controller for an environment, you are creating a brand new forest. And we can even look at what Microsoft calls it, right? So and I recommend, always look at Microsoft's documentation first. It's good to look at these blogs, but you also want to see what's a forest, you want to see what does Microsoft say about it. Yeah, so look, check this out. So in the organizational domain forest model, several autonomous groups each own a domain within a forest. Each group controls domain level service administration, which enables them to maintain certain aspects of the service management autonomously, while the forest owner controls forest level service management. The following illustration shows an organizational domain forest model. Right? So you've got the domain, the forest root, which is, Twitch Institute of Technology .net or .edu. right? And then you have your 3 divisions, right? So you could say, I don't know, web, or, it's not, Twitch Institute of Technology is not that big. But when I think about multiple domains environments, I'm thinking about a big organization that has different sites in different states, maybe different countries. And then when you have a different, there's so many different ways to use domains. You can use it, you can categorize groups of people, but usually you're using a security group for that. So I think it makes more sense when you're when you're creating domains or a domain, you think about it like this, based on the divisions of your business. I'm not just talking about departments. I'm talking about like if Twitch Institute of Technology had a China campus, or a campus in Japan would have their own domain. But the forest or the root domain would be Twitch Institute of Technology. So maybe China's Twitch Institute of Technology would be China.Twitch Institute of Technology. Because when you're setting up a domain, it's not too much different than like a domain name that you buy on the web, because it is a namespace from which DNS resolves requests based off of. Because when you set up the domain controller, you also have a DNS server that has records, DNS records, like pointing from names to IP addresses, right? Allowing you to search for resources based on name. So DNS is also a big part of the domain controllers in Active Directory, right? Does that make sense? Does that clear up forests at all? Let me know in the chat. Let me know in the comments. What is a forest? How do you use forests? How do you interpret what a forest is? So that was what Microsoft says about forests. So forest is really like a group of domains, right? And when you create your first forest, you're creating the root forest, which is the top level of your network, of your environment, the top level domain of your environment. So we're going to call this, Twitch Institute of Technology and I'm going to use internal, and I'll tell you why, because I don't own that domain name on the web. Microsoft, and I did look this up. This is in their docs. The best practice for this whole domain name thing is to own the domain name and make it like a .net or a .com, or if you're a school, a .edu, and get that domain name. And you can go out to websites like Namecheap. You can buy them on Google. You can buy them on, Amazon has Route 53. You can buy domains on and stuff and manage DNS. But know that you should own that domain name that you're going to be using. But in this case, since it's educational, I typically will name it like .internal or .local. But it is a best practice, as recommended by Microsoft, for you to own that domain on the web too. Because a lot of services are web-based, and you may be tying your Active Directory to internet-based resources where having a web domain is necessary, okay? Right? Because then you may be basing so check this out. What do you think email's based off of? Your email account is probably tied to Active Directory, right? So if you have a user on the network, you also have an email account. If something's wrong with your user account, something's probably going to be wrong with your email account. If you need to reset your password in your user account, and you reset it as you log into the machine, or your users log into the machine, it's also going to change their password when they log into their email, right? So these are all things to consider. And I'm trying to bring in a practical thought process to it, like apply it to something you may see every day. But this is a big deal. Exchange had this breach, right? This huge vulnerability in Exchange, look it up, check it out. It's a big deal because Exchange is email. So who owns email in the enterprise? Microsoft. And look, I'm not a Microsoft fanboy. I like Microsoft. I think they have cool stuff, but I also like Linux. I like Mac. I like Apple's products, but I will say they don't own email. They don't own enterprise email. So Microsoft has identity and they have email. So they've tied those two together, and we know email. I'm not sure when email's going. Like, just for the record, on a side rant, can we go to Discord? Can we just go to Discord and just that's how we communicate? And I'm saying this to business people in the enterprise. Maybe like if it's something that you gotta cover your anatomy on, that's when you go to email. But you can screenshot IM, instant messages, right? So it's like, why are we still using email? I don't know. But let's go to Discord, people. Like, come on. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too close-minded, but right, email is the thing we still use and we still heavily rely upon, right? That's how bosses get tasks to their employees right now, especially during the pandemic and being socially distanced and working remote, But email is old school. So the IT Leo, for sure, he's saying, look, email's old school. Discord's the place to be. I think we need to go to if we can't go to email, if we can't go to Discord, and that's too much of a leap. Let's go to Teams, at least Microsoft Teams. I like that instant ability to text somebody and message them, right? So it's it's got more of I don't know, it's more organic. I don't think we should always have to call and be face to face. That's not always possible. But the text and the whole Discord community thing, I was thinking about Discord earlier, this is breakthrough. And the way you share information with each other, just quick. Upload files to the server. So I'm going next. Creating the root domain name. There's a few things I'm going to break down here that you're going to want to be aware of as a Microsoft or Windows system administrator. Look, select functional level. What is that up there? So I want you to just think of, for now, a functional level is like a feature set for that environment. And, this version of Server 2019, I think, was an evaluation copy. So that's why you're not seeing Windows Server 2019. Even though this is Windows Server 2019, you're not seeing a 2019 feature set. This is a big deal. Why? In the last lesson we talked about why system administrators don't rush to go to the next Windows Server operating system that comes out, because normally it doesn't really add that much of a major step forward in features on a server, and because it's a bear, right? If you're a big huge company, have a big huge network environment, if it doesn't show a demonstrable benefit, or Microsoft isn't forcing you via their end of life and their licensing and their support agreements, then you may not need to migrate. Because if they're still coming out with updates, they're still coming out with security updates, don't move those servers. Don't move those servers, because you could bring things down and it gets hairy. But this functional level, let's say you're like, okay, we need to move to the next latest greatest server operating system. You really want to upgrade your domain controller first, because if you find out there's some new feature that comes out with the new Windows Server OS and you install it on something that's not the primary domain controller, whatever your domain controller is, the primary is going to be how the whole environment runs. So if your whole domain environment, I bet this is going to be a common thing already. And this is where projects come up for you to come in and help companies update and migrate. Let's say we have a lot of companies out there still running Windows Server 2012. And somebody looked that up. How many Windows Server 2012 OSs are still in use by businesses? Maybe some IT data analytics firm has that information. But if you're looking to move off of it, you got to think about, okay, well, I need to update that domain controller first, because you can't just plug in a Server 2016 system, in a big, huge environment and say, okay, now we have 2016 or 2019 functionality or whatever, OS they're going to come out with next. What is it, 2021, 2022? You can't just do that, put that in the environment and it works, right? As expected, you have to do the primary to make sure. So I'm beating a dead horse with that one. But below that, specify your domain controller's capabilities. So domain name system server, DNS. Does anybody know what DNS is? I got DNS. I got a pretty good video, I believe, is pretty good. 2 of them on YouTube on DNS. DNS basically is the domain name server. So anytime I go out to a website, like let's say, I don't know. Say I'm going to Twitch. Let's just go to Twitch TV. And I go to Twitch and it pulls up Twitch. When I hit enter, I didn't type in an IP address like I did when I went to my server here, right? Well, let me pull this down. When I type in my IP address, I didn't use DNS for this. But when I typed in twitch.tv and I went there, what ended up happening was immediately my browser saw that name. I hit enter. There's a DNS resolver on my computer and on my NIC that sent a request to resolve that domain name and to find the public IP address of Twitch's servers nearest to me in the DNS servers. And the DNS on the web works amazingly. It's a really sophisticated system, really. Look up DNS, look up Dyn. Oracle owns Dyn. They're a huge DNS provider. AWS is a huge DNS provider too. And, it resolves the name to an IP address. So DNS makes navigating the web and the internet much easier for humans. Okay? Because we use names instead of IP addresses. Without DNS, we would actually have to remember the IP addresses of all our favorite websites. And with IPv6, you got these long hexadecimal addresses that are not going to be things people memorize. So without DNS, shout out to DNS. Look, DNS, we love you, because without you, I don't think as many people would be using the World Wide Web or the internet, because we would not remember the IP address of our favorite websites, right? We probably would not. Another way you can look at DNS is it's like the contact app in your phone. If you have a smartphone, if you have a just flip cell phone, you have a contacts list, right? So instead of needing to remember people's phone numbers, you can just know a name, or you can ask that digital assistant to call somebody by name. Now, some of you might have memorized some of your closest people and loved ones, their phone numbers, but you probably haven't. You probably don't even know their phone number anymore, right? You probably, the first time they told you, you just were like, I don't even want to remember it because I don't need to, right? So DNS works just like the phone contacts. Technically, it's a little different, but in principle, it works the same. They are mad old school, but there are people that use them. People use flip phones because they don't want to be distracted by the craziness of the smartphone, or they might be a little weary about some of the security implications that come with owning a smartphone. So I'm going next. Net BIOS. Let's skip past this. okay, this is a good thing to know. These are the default locations of like Active Directory's database, right? So like if you look at Active Directory database, that's where the actual database is. And I noticed like organizations like Veeam, sorry, I got to stretch. Organizations like Veeam, which are like really focused on backup and disaster recovery, they make software tools that are, specifically backup Active Directory. So you may actually want to get a copy of Active Directory and not just have backed up and not just have an image, because there are companies popping up like let me show you. So I'll show you honorable mention. I'm not sponsored by these companies. I just respect them. Veeam is a big time player in backup and disaster recovery, and then there's Datto, which is really interesting. Datto's doing some really cool stuff. But, Veeam, I said Veeam, they make so many software utilities to back up servers, to image servers. Like image-based backups are getting more and more popular because it essentially captures the volume or the file system, and then it captures the OS, so you could restore from a VM. They also have started coming out with some, and I don't have much experience with Veeam's cloud backup stuff. Like I don't know exactly how that works. Maybe we'll do that too. But Veeam has some cloud-based backups, and you can see they're used by a lot of big names. So Gartner is a research analytics firm for IT, looks at the market, and they put them in the top, right? So they named a leader for the 4th time. So then Datto, let me say, this is one that's really interesting too. Datto is really specific to MSPs, but when you use a Datto product, they're going to either send you out the NAS, or they can send you you can download some software and put it on a flash drive and run it off Linux. And what it does is it's image-based backups that use a technology called inverse chain. And it essentially captures an ongoing image backup and an ongoing volume backup. So if I wanted to restore data from the backup earlier today, I could just go into this interface in Datto and click the time that backup happened. And the interface is really nice. The last time I checked, the backbone was Ubuntu Linux. So their software is built on Ubuntu, and they make the hardware, but they send the hardware out to you. And you initially need to take a huge backup and send them a hard drive in the mail, and they'll plug it into their servers, so it has like a source copy of that system to base the chain of backups off of. It's pretty sophisticated, honestly. But the other option here, other than just restoring from like a volume, because when you pick that restore point, it mounts a volume, which shows up like a flash drive would on a network, or like a map drive would on a network, or a share, and you connect to it and you can restore the data exactly where it was. You could also, they have utilities where you can, look at this, cloud continuity for PCs. So let's say there's a building on fire, right? And the data is just getting destroyed, or I don't know, the servers are on fire in the data center, and the company can't work now because there was a natural disaster of some sort. Datto has the technology that lets you spin that whole environment up, because it's image based in the cloud, and just make sure you change your IP addresses and your IP schemes and point to the internet. And as you point to the internet, and to wherever the cloud environment is, you can keep working on your infrastructure as it was. So really cool image-based backups they're coming. Somebody asked in the chat, where are we in our in our diagram. So here's our diagram, still the same. We're just right here. We're on our domain controller. So let's go back here. Let's keep this install going. So I'll do next. This is saying, hey, look, review all your options. Next. And this is the process that takes a little bit longer. It doesn't take forever. You know, like we won't be waiting here on stream forever. But it's doing a prerequisite check. It's really checking the password complexity, making sure that, you know, the default password is up to par. And then it's checking that I have an IP address. It's checking that I have a network connection. So if none of those, like, for example, if even one of those did not check the box, like if I didn't have a network connection to this server, or I didn't, you know, have an IP address on it, then this would fail the prereq and I would have to go fix that. So you install, and now it's going to go through its process. It's going to start creating the database automatically. You know, it's going to create those 3 directories it showed you. It's going to put everything in place required for Active Directory to run. And you can see more about install options. And I think they show, oh, it opened up Explorer. There's an option somewhere. Maybe I missed it. It was back there somewhere. But there's a way that they give you like a script. I think it might have been on the last step. I missed it. But there's a way you can see how to do this in PowerShell. Because you can install a domain controller using PowerShell. So technically all this could be done through command line. I've never tried that, to be honest with you. I've never tried installing Active Directory and doing the domain controller process using PowerShell. But I'm sure somebody's got that documented on the web. You can copy and paste it. So this is going to reboot now. So we've successfully upgraded this server to a domain controller. When this reboots, we're going to have Active Directory, and I'm going to show you how you should, according to best business practices, you know, at least recommended by Microsoft, to organize your Active Directory structure. And we're gonna do that together here. We have time. We have another hour, so it's fantastic. That's why the 2-hour time frame is good. You can fit in a lot of stuff. You can do a lot with 2 hours. So somebody asked in the chat, am I streaming daily this week? I won't be streaming tomorrow. So Wednesday I'm going to take off from streaming, but then we're going to get back to Sys Admin Camp on Thursday. And depending on how far we get on Thursday, we may even spill over to Friday, because the way it's looking is that this is going to go past Thursday. Well, that's the goal, really, is to let's pick up some momentum in a lot of different areas. Like, let's pick up momentum in sysadmin stuff and network admin stuff, and in our ethical hacking stuff, because we do ethical hacking on Saturdays. You know, we get on Hack the Box, and we do some of the CTF focused stuff and play around and hack the box. So if you want to be there, if you want to do that, you know, feel free to come there too on Saturdays. But I think if you know, Friday we're probably going to do some Hack the Box. What do they call these little loading dots? Does anybody know what Microsoft calls the loading dots? Somebody Google that for me. I'm gonna try to catch him. Can I catch him? I'm gonna be like one of the Pac-Man. I think it would be fun to do some Linux stuff. You know, the only reason, I do Linux stuff when I'm working with like Kali and Parrot. But the reason I don't do too much like educational focused Linux videos is because I haven't had too much enterprise experience with administering Linux systems. So, you know, that's why I don't do much of that. But I do have experience with Red Hat Enterprise Linux in a lab environment. And then, you know, we used Ansible in one class I had, and it was amazing. I fell in love with Ansible. Yeah, I think it would be kind of cool to learn. We'll do like a learn on stream with Red Hat. But the thing is, I probably couldn't teach Ansible off the top of my head. So that would be a learn on stream thing. So we would have a task, and then we would do it. We would try to do it together and say, oh, hey, what's wrong with your run book? Look, can you check my code and see if there's something wrong? Or, hey, what didn't happen? That would be fun. We could learn that one together. Yeah, let's plan that somewhere down the line. So send keys. Let's do Control-Alt-Delete. Another good practice might be here to take a snapshot. So what does that mean? That's like what I was talking about, where you can capture a backup of an image. This is kind of like a really simplistic way that VMware does it. Or I guess you could say not simplistic, bare bones way. So if I hit take snapshot, I could say after first domain controller install. So then, you know, it'll take a backup, right? Take a snapshot. It'll save that. So let's say something just blows up this system. Or like, let's say we're like, hey, let's launch an attack against Active Directory and use all these different tools like Bloodhound. Bloodhound is a tool that lets you attack Active Directory. And, you know, we break something and it doesn't work. And Sys Admin Camp can't happen, and we have to, or Sys Admin Camp has to be delayed because we broke Active Directory. Then we could just go back to the initial snapshot that put us before we broke it. And in a business environment, this could help you, you know, not get fired. Because that's one of the things you don't want, is to get fired. And that's profound wisdom that I was once told, so I have chosen to pass that down. You know, I'm kidding. But all right, here's a thing here that you need to know. Notice before we had the domain controller and before we had Active Directory, there was no TWIOT before a backslash. And the backslash is the going downhill. Think a backslash goes downhill, a forward slash goes uphill. So forward slash, oh, you're not going to be able to see that. So a forward slash goes uphill, you know, and a backslash goes downhill. But when you see this, to the left of that backslash is the domain name, right? So you'll see the domain name, and then after it is the user that is on the domain. Before this, we only had accounts that existed on the local machine. Every Windows system, Windows 10, you name it, 7, you know, go as far back as to Windows NT, had local user accounts. And then domains and stuff came into the equation. And you had now where there was one location where all user accounts could be created, so you didn't have to manage user accounts on all the devices on the entire network. It was just on one device or one Active Directory environment. So when you're logging into a system, I'll click other user and show you this. Let's say you said, no, I want to log in locally. There's something wrong with the domain controller that I can't get access to it anymore, whatever. Like, let's say you're on a Windows 10 system and your user is getting an error on their account that says I've seen errors like this. The trust relationship with the domain controller has been damaged. And they can't log into their computer because they're trying to log in using their domain account. And for whatever reason, it didn't cache those credentials locally and let them log in locally with them. Then you can do a period / sorry. Let's see if will it let me do this. So period / or even machine name /. Normally when you do period / what will happen is the sign into box will change. So I'm doing this right. So that'll happen in Windows 10. You can do a period / and it'll tell you to log in. It'll change the sign into to the local machine. This is the domain. So I'll say this is good knowledge to have. Any domain joined system, Windows domain joined system, is going to try to default to logging in to the domain and not the local machine. But occasionally you may need to actually log into the local machine. And notice how things change here, right? We could do, what's the name of this machine? I think it's TWIT-server-01. And do you see that, how it changed when I did that? Because I did specify the host name. There's something about Windows Server that doesn't like the period /, but in Windows 10, if you do a period / at the sign in, it'll look locally if you're on a machine that's domain joined. So we do that. Go back, just some fun tips there that you can tuck away. Take it or leave it. Let's log in as our domain admin. So again, right now, one of the things that happened as we logged into or as we installed our domain controller and rebooted is our initial admin account became a domain admin. And that's big time, right? So if you're a domain admin, you can set permissions, you can create users, delete users, create groups, delete groups. And so I'm going to show you a couple of things here about Active Directory that you need to know if you're going to be on a server managing Active Directory. So where do we go from here? We go to tools, right? And along with, the database and the actual creation of Active Directory were several different management snap-ins. Microsoft calls the tools that you use to manage their services snap-ins or add-ins or add-ons, right? But the term you hear typically is a add-in or a management console. So you want to base your operations from Active Directory users and computers, because this is where you can pretty much create all the structure of Active Directory and all the users and groups and stuff. So I'm going to show you the bottom bar and what the icon looks like in Windows. You see that? How it shows you it's like a book. Some authors explain Active Directory as the blue or the yellow pages of your network. If you remember what the yellow pages were, it was like a directory of every business that was registered in that city, right? But now, you have the internet. So the yellow pages are not very relevant anymore. But that's what that's kind of based on. It's kind of like a book, of names and resources that are in your domain. So what I recommend is, anytime you're using the GUI of Windows Server, to any tool that you use regularly, pin that thing to the taskbar. So you can right click here, pin that thing, so you can be lazy. So I'm going to delete this, and look, it's still there, so it'll stay there. If you didn't know that about Windows, now you know. So you could open it up anytime you log in. there's also tools that I'm going to show you that you can manage Active Directory without connecting to the domain controller. So without like remoting in, or because you're not going to take a laptop or a display, a monitor and a cart and plug into the domain controller. Most of the time you're going to access it remotely. So there's management software I'm going to show you, and we should get to that tonight. So for now, I'm going to get into the structure of Active Directory. So this is the Active Directory structure. So if you're just hitting this module in this long video, awesome. The structure of Active Directory matters. You should not treat these, which are called OUs, and I want you to notice these, they look like folders, right? And they look like directories, but they're actually a resource called an OU. OU is short for organizational unit. And let me say this, an organizational unit is a container for Active Directory objects. For now, the Active Directory objects you need to know are users, groups, and computers, okay? They're users, groups, and computers. There's other objects in Active Directory, but for now, know about those three. And then, obviously, OU is an AD object, but it contains others for the purpose of group policy. So if you put resources inside of a OU, you can apply group policy, which allows you to automate, security policies and certain tasks that get applied, or default settings that get applied to a bunch of systems, Windows systems, right? So, we're going to get into that. I promise you're going to be like, whoa, I didn't realize you could do all that in Windows. If you haven't already done a lot of this, some of you are like, I do this every day. And then others are like, oh, this is kind of cool. So either way, if this is something that's like really easy to you and you just do it all the time, give some tips. If there's something that you see me doing that's like, you could be doing that a little bit better, comment. Give me a message in the chat or in the comments below and tell me, hey, look, this is something you may want to check out. And I will, right? Hop in the Discord and, interact with us. You could add to the community, right? If you feel like you got some knowledge that, we're not touching on, add to it. So OUs, let's go back to this. So OUs, containers for Active Directory objects. Notice under the domain controllers, OU, there is our domain controller. This is a computer account. So then there's the default users OU as well, where all the default group and user accounts are now stored. So if I wanted to change the default or the built-in administrator account password, I would do that here. If I wanted to restrict anything like login time, I would do that here. Look at, maybe you want to note domain controllers. Look here, let me show you the group. The group to rule the domain is the domain admins. So if you look at the members of the domain admin, you see administrator. So anybody who's going to be a domain admin, they need to be added to this group. And in AD, this is where you add people to groups. You go here, you go add, and you type in their name, right? And then, so I'm going to show you the creation of this stuff. Hopefully everybody's with me. Y'all still with me? Whether you're sitting on the couch, laying on the bed, chilling, you don't have to engage in chat, but sometimes it helps. So let me know if you're following. So we're going to start creating OUs, okay? So this top level, this is our domain. Somebody asked a question earlier about forest. What's a forest? Well, that's the forest right there. And this is really our domain now, is twiot.internal, Twitch Institute of Technology, .internal. The reason we called it .internal is because we did not want to go out there and buy this domain, because this is a teaching moment. This is something that is a demonstration. This is not going to be a production environment per se, long term. It's going to just be for training. So, we don't have to own the domain. All right. So what we're going to do first when you're in Active Directory is we're going to create, oh, sweet. Awesome. So that's just so you all know. Anybody out there, just like Erwick there, Erwick42 says, I'm literally following. Got a VM loaded up in Hyper-V. Any of these demos, I will say, are best enjoyed if you do this as I do it, like Erwick is doing. But if not, if you're chilling, you're good. You can learn as well if you're just chilling, eating chips, hot Cheetos, Cheeto Puffs, Lay's, Ritz crackers, cookies, milk. I don't know. Whatever you're doing. Oh, I love some hot Cheetos. So that's why I mentioned them. But anyways, if whatever you're doing, you can learn. I'm glad you're here. But the best way to learn IT stuff is to do it. So if you're listening to me or you're listening to somebody else online or watching somebody else online, try to follow along. You know, I as a teacher myself of IT things, I deliberately try to make the things I do accessible so that people could actually follow. You know what I mean? And that's one way to learn. There's another way to learn too, is just observation. You're just, you're hanging out, you're looking, you're saying, I've never tried it that way. Or he really should be trying. You could be critiquing the heck out of me right now, and that's good because you're learning. In some ways you're saying, that's not right. I would do it this way. Armchair admin. They call it an armchair quarterback when you're like, hey, he should have thrown to him. How would he miss that? He should have caught that. I would have caught that. But this is you could be an armchair admin. Like, he should have just right-clicked that and done that. Or he should have just did this and that. So, that's fun. But, okay, let's go back. With Active Directory, first thing that we're going to do is we are going to create an OU structure. You're probably thinking, there's already OUs here. They're default. Why don't I just go with the defaults? Well, Microsoft doesn't know how your business is structured, so why would they create OUs for you that were reflective of your business? Just let that marinate a little bit. They won't. So what you're going to do is you're going to create what's called departmental OUs. And the IT Leo says that in the chat. So I'm going to hit right click here. I'm going to new. I'm going to organizational unit. So right click, new, OU. Right click, new, OU. And then you hit organizational unit. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to create an OU that's TWIOT. Because, you may one day have a company come in that you acquire, or another school, or I don't know how colleges work when do colleges acquire other colleges? I don't think so. But if it's a company and they use AD, part of buying another company involves adopting in their resources. So domains may have to merge, and that can get messy if there's not a good organization of OUs and a good organization of how the AD structure is set up. It's a messy process in the first place. It's hard to do. But you go, okay, I wanted you to see there something when I initially created this OU. It says that the OU is protected from accidental deletion. So if I just hit here and I tried to delete it, I couldn't just do it. It's going to say, hey, you're not allowed. There's a way to enable the ability to delete OUs, and I'm going to show you this. You go to View, and you go to Advanced Features. Bam! It almost like unlocks this realm of hidden possibilities. I just made it sound much more interesting than it is. But you go right-click Properties after that, and you go to the object, and you can actually uncheck this Protect Object from Accidental Deletion. And I could hit Apply here, and I'm going to show you, this is the cool thing about us in our own lab. We can just delete stuff because we're not going to really break anything and get fired, right? So if you are in a business environment, I think you should have a lab too that's like you almost treat like production, but you experiment with it so you can learn things on that environment that you could adopt into the production environment. So, but at home, you should have a lab just for your own fun and games, right? So you don't have to be mad that someone else has, hoarding all the knowledge at work or hoarding all the access at work. You could just say, hey, at least I got my domain at home. At least I got my servers in the cloud that I can play with, right? So we could right click here, new OU, and then I'm just going to create another TUIOT. Okay. And then under here is where I'm going to start creating departments. What were our departments again? They were kind of interesting departments for a school, right? So we had, we had 3 departments. We had management, developers, accounting. Right, so let's just create those. This is a school, so they would have faculty too, but let's just, for the purpose of this demonstration, let's go this way. So this is going to be reflective of the departmental structure of the company. And this is where I'm saying, and we've been talking about this, as a Sys admin, your IT should not be separate from the business, meaning it should not be, you should not be buying things that don't make good business sense, or you should not be setting things up that don't make good business sense to have, right? And that don't positively impact the overall goal and mission of the organization in the structure of the organization, right? So, right, so I'm going to create departmental OUs here. We're going to do, what was it? Accounting. We can do management. Maybe we could say developers are also the instructors, right? We just call them developers or something. So we do developers. And we could even add, let's make a 4th. Let's do faculty. And then accounting. And notice how I'm grouping them underneath TWIOT. And then accounting, faculty. Right, since it's a school. They typically use that term to categorize the instructors. Management is called administration. So we've got our OUs for our departments. Now I'm going to show you something that might not make sense at first, so don't be mad at me. I promise you I'll explain it. I'm going to show you that each departmental OU should have 2 sub OUs, and that's it. We're not going any deeper with OUs because it could become OUception. We don't want to be in the OU matrix and be like, where are we? I don't know where I am. I'm in this OU inside of an OU inside of an OU. And I don't know where to go. So we don't want to get too deep into this, right? We're going to go right click. We're going to create this, we're going to call it computers. I'm going to call it, just to be safe, management computers. And then this could be where you make a mistake. If you create it in here, remember it gets grouped inside of this OU. So we want 2 sub OUs under management. So we're going to say, then there's going to be management, users, and groups. I'm going to explain why I did that, because you're like, I don't know, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe. The reason you're doing 2 sub OUs is for group policy. There's really 2 different types of group policies. And when we get to group policy, I promise it'll make a whole lot more sense. There's computer configuration policies and there's user configuration policies. Meaning there's policies you can apply to computers that impact that entire computer regardless of who's logged in. And then there's other policies you can create and apply that apply to specific users that log in. Like we could do, I'm going to think of something basic. Like, let's say with a user policy, we wanted to change the desktop background to something that, was representative of their department. A picture of a cat. I don't know. In management. And then when management logs in, everybody sees the picture of the cat, right? Through group policy. But only people who are in management would see that. Meaning only once you start joining computers to the domain, you can move them into this OU And any group policy that's applied to that OU will apply to their computer automatically. So group policy is a bit of an automated or an automation as well. It allows you to start automating like on premises. Now it's not as like elegant and cool as like your DevOps stuff, but it's not DevOps. It's more like automating some of the system administration tasks that you might have. And it does do a good job of that, right? It does a good job. If you have, for example, if you have a password policy change, you're going to do that in group policy that like requires, a certain number of characters and a reset after every, month. That will be a group policy. So, and we're going to talk about group policies, after the OUs. But, so we got management. We're going to do the same thing. So if you're following me, just practice with this. Go into the other departments, and I'll do that for you just so you can get used to seeing it. So developers will have computers. I'm going to OK that. This was all day. I had a job where this was just like all day, setting up DCs. But in a lot of cases, the company already has a DC, or when I say DC or AD, domain controller or Active Directory, they already have one set up. So I was coming into an environment where I had to understand it already, so I just had to interpret what theirs was set up like, and then move from there. So then here, go to OU, accounting, users, and then, oh, no, I meant computers. See, that's where you can mess up. So, can I rename? Yeah. The order doesn't matter, like in the list here. It really doesn't matter. So we'll do here. Let me know in the chat, how do y'all use OUs? How do you organize your OU structure? We can do faculty, users, and groups. Okay. All right, we've got them created. Okay. Now, we're going to create our first user. We're going to create our first users and groups. So now that you have your OU structure, you're done. Congratulations. You have set up, and we have set up OUs in Active Directory. Most of the battle has been won. Now we're going to create users. You don't create the computers. You join the computers because they're out there in the wild. They're on the network. They get joined to the domain. And I'm going to show you using a Windows 10 VM how you can join a Windows computer to a domain. Right? So we're going to go to management, users, and groups. And the first thing we're going to do in here, we're going to create a security group. Notice this, a group. What is a group? Anybody know? Anybody can define it? A group is different from an OU. Look at even the icon. It's a different object completely. So we're going to create a security group. Distribution groups is like, if you think about an email, if you create an email contact list, it's kind of like a distribution group where you can think about it as just people getting that email en masse, right? So, but security groups are different. Security groups are used to apply to shared resources like printers and like file shares. That's a very common one, a file share on a network that hosts, a database for a proprietary application. You may restrict access to that folder so that not just anybody can get into it. But that still doesn't fully answer the management or the group and how you use them to manage. Just at a basic level, a group is a collection of user accounts. So the user accounts already have to exist, and you just add them to the group. So that if you're managing your resources out there in the wild, you just add the group to the resource. You don't add the user, because if you think about it, if you have an organization like if Twitch Institute of Technology has, I don't know, let's say they're big, they have 1,000 faculty, and you have a lot of shared resources out there that are secured and using this model. Excuse me, I use my hands to talk, so I'll hit the mic occasionally. You're gonna add the group instead of the users, because if you were adding users to that shared resource, then what happens when somebody gets let go, the maintenance of that, or if somebody leaves, the maintenance of that's going to be a monster, because you have to go in and find where all the resources they were added to. At that point you might as well just delete the account. But then there's just a existing SID there, which is a security issue, because in Windows, this is Windows system security stuff, there's a SID. It's a security identifier. It's this number, it's this character string that gets created and is associated with a object, and they could be exploited. So don't leave SIDs. SID rot. Can we call that SID rot? Let's go. Okay, and then we're gonna say management. Who's in management? We're gonna just create one user. We're gonna create one group and one user per department, just for the demonstration purposes. So here's basically help desk stuff, right? So somebody gets hired in management. HR sends you an email if you're like a director or a part of the leadership IT team. They send you that information. Hey, this person's been hired. We need them to have this account. Could be some forms that were filled out for this process to get initiated. Because not just anybody should be able to get an account created in their in an environment, in AD, right? So, okay, so it gets approved. We know this is a legit person. They're hired. They're new here. We go here, new user, and then you could say, whoever it is, Jim Flimflam. So Jim Flimflam, he's hired. And so this is another thing. In system administration, especially with Active Directory, there's usually some type of naming convention when it comes to logon and usernames, right? So the most common thing I've seen is first initial last name, or first initial dot last name. I've also seen last name dot first name. So it would, if it was that, it would be flimflam dot Jim. Or you could just do J Flimflam. What's up, J Flimflam? What you up to? So then, you got this created. There's no initials there. Notice the login name is at the domain. So if you never understood how an email was structured, an email address, it's username at the domain. So if you are Gmail, you are, Jim J Flimflam at gmail.com. It's associated with not necessarily always associated with an Active Directory domain, but you do know it's associated with a domain, right? That's owned by that company. So you go next. And then this is where you create their password. And practically speaking, at this point, there should be some type of random password you come up with when you help them set up their environment. You call them on the phone. This is kind of an ideal scenario. You call them on the phone and you say, or you meet with them in person and you say, this is your initial password. Go ahead and get logged in for me. When you first log in, it is going to ask you to reset your password. So it'll ask you to reset your password. That's why this is checked. Look, user must change password at next logon. So when they log on for the first time, it prompts them, and then they can get in. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Leave it checked. Cool. cool. We just created gem flim flam. We created management. But just because we created those two separate objects doesn't mean they have a relationship yet. So we're going to go into management, members, and then we're going to add J flim flam. So you could do a J flim flam. Check. Notice the location, it's searching the domain for that. So it's searching Active Directory for the existence of this object. If it wasn't there, it would give me some strange error. Like I would say, I want that, but that doesn't exist. So look at the error. It's going to say, hey, I don't know what that is. So it's like, here, I don't know what that is. Do you need some more advanced options? I'm just going to do J flim flam. I always check. I don't know, just to have it. Hit OK, added, apply. You just added a user to a group. You know, we can go through here and create all that, but you know what it is. You know how to do it now. You just right click. It's pretty simple. What do you say we join a domain? We have time. We're at 1 hour and 36 minutes. We have until 2 hours for this particular session, this particular meeting. Now what we're going to do is we're going to join a Windows 10 system to the domain. So this is us. Jim Flim Flam's management, Twitch Institute of Technology. Do we say Jim Flim Flam's a president of Twitch Institute of Technology? I would say, or the chancellor, whatever they call it. They always use the fancy names in higher ed. Jim Flim Flam, he's the president. Okay, so Jim Flim Flam is going to be logging into his computer for the first time. And we're going to do that in a VM. But I'll say typically that is not how it's done. It's going to be on a laptop. It's going to be on a desktop. Something in the office. So we're going to have to pretend, use our imagination about Jim Flim Flam. So this is running still. But I'm going to go over to here. To be honest with y'all, this Windows 10 VM I'm about to open, I haven't opened it in a while, so I don't know what's going to go on here. So we're going to open this VM, this Windows 10 VM. I think this was part of the old domain, so I might run into issues logging in. But we'll try it. Just save time, so we don't have to do a fresh install of Windows 10. Have you been enjoying this so far? Have you been enjoying this? Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the chat. Is it fun to learn on stream with us? I think so, if you're still here. So let's do see, I had an oh Lord. My last domain was called oh Lord, he coming. So other user. It's going to be interesting. Is it administrator maybe? There we go. Yeah, so see the period / I mentioned this earlier. I'm on Windows 10. I did period /. It's looking for my old domain, which was Alod, because it's joined to Alod. And then we go boom. And that's a meme. That's a meme. Anytime you see like a chunky cat or animal, you put oh Lord, he coming. And then you could do administrator. I think that's the default. But I have to still guess. I have to guess what my password was. Nope. This was a long time ago. Let's put a I don't think caps matter. Let's see. That might be like Windows saying chill man. You're typing things too fast and it's too many wrong times. Too fast. You've been wrong too fast too many times. That's basically when it prevents you from DDoSing, right? Like a timeout period for attempting login. I mean, truthfully, we may have to redo that. I want to get into this. I really don't want to do a fresh install, so I'm going to keep trying to brute force into this. So maybe it'll let me get in, because when you log into a domain for the first time, it does cache your credentials, which means stores it locally for future login, to try to avoid not being able to access a computer if there's a network issue. But let's see. I usually use the same lab passwords, but in this case it doesn't look like I did. So it wouldn't hurt us to do a fresh install. I just want to make sure for sure that I have to. Nah, that's that. You've been wrong too many times, and you've been trying too many times. That's what Windows needs to say. Or Cortana. They need to have Cortana just tell you, you've been wrong too many times. And it's been too many. You've been going too fast. You've been too fast and wrong too many times. Bam. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use the term YOLO. I'm just gonna YOLO this Windows 10, or yeet this Windows 10 VM. So yes, I did pull out the old school meme. Vine. Yeet is Vine. Yes, so I am a millennial, so I am hip to the memes, and I do reference them in my language. I do. I know it is not professional. It is not professional to just actually. Oh, what did I just do? You guys should have told me to stop. Just stop. Like, dude, just stop. Just power off your VM right now. Immediately. Okay, here we're gonna right click, delete that bad boy. It's down here. It says delete. Sorry. Don't know your password. So we're gonna create the Windows 10 VM. We're gonna call it our TIOT client. So for those of you that never have seen VMware or ESXi in the creation of a VM, lo and behold, here we go. We're creating a Windows 10 VM. So I'm going to click a new virtual machine. I'm going to call this Jim Flam's desktop. Nah, he's going to have a laptop. So that's a good question. Somebody in the chat, what do we do? What hardware do we pick for our... Because as a system administrator, and really as like the IT director, they're going to have a meeting. Hopefully the IT director is going to have a meeting with his or her team to talk about what PCs, what technology do the employees here at this college need to succeed? Like what do we want to give them, and how is that whole setup going to go? You're going to look at cost. You're going to look at what your organization can afford. You're going to look at what functionality is there for you. I personally like things that can be repaired and taken apart. So like, yes, it's cool to have surface stuff, but you can't really repair those easily. You got to break the screen. It's like got a 1 on repairability. If you look at iFixit, there's a really cool hardware company called iFixit. They're big on the repairability of devices. So any new consumer electronics device that comes out, they will basically take it apart, and they will write a write-up on it, and they will do a review. They will, like a video or just a review in their write-up, and say at 1 out of 10 how repairable is this machine. I think the Surface series got a 1 because it's just they broke the screen. So I'm gonna next through this. I'm picking the storage location. I am gonna breeze through this because in the first video I did talk about this. So this isn't gonna get as much RAM. I think we can keep that amount of RAM. How many cores does Windows 10 need to run? How many can I afford to give? I think I can afford that. I can run 2 VMs pretty solid on this server, but after that it starts getting hairy. So we got 32 gigs storage, 4 gigs of RAM. We're gonna pick an ISO. I think I have the Windows 10 ISO in here. It's an older one. Yeah, it's this one. So look, April 28 or 2020. Boom. Let's use this one. Select it, and then just like if you were sliding a CD or a USB drive, flash drive into a USB port, and you boot it off the USB, you're gonna have to click enter to boot off the media. So I'm done. I'm finished with that. I'm gonna have to launch this. I should have made sure. I should have tested. I didn't think about that leading up to this stream. I'm sorry. To test that Windows 10 VM. I guess I just assumed. So we'll be able to set that up. In the meantime, just enjoy the music. I will show you where I'm playing this from. This is Spotify. This is a playlist, nice playlist actually, called DMCA Free Lo-Fi Beats by Braden Warren. Put these together, claiming it's copyright free. So they're submitting like copyright free music because of this whole, and I'm gonna sidetrack a little bit. There's this legislation that has passed that is really trying to, I'll say this, it's Digital Media Copyright Act. That's what DMCA is. And it's to combat the theft of intellectual property in people's digital media stuff. Like, come on, people are stealing it. Look, my favorite artist of all time, musical artist, is Kendrick Lamar. I love rap and I love his music. But one thing you'll notice online is, on YouTube particularly, is you'll notice that people will legitimately, they will download the whole album, upload it, put a nice little cool background in the video, but it'll be the whole album, like Kendrick Lamar's album, on their YouTube channel. So to me, that's stealing. You have just stolen somebody's album that worked tirelessly on that and put it on, and you're profiting. Like, if you notice some of these playlist channels, like if you Google a song you want to listen to, pay attention to who the channel you're listening to is. It might actually be a channel that doesn't own that music. And this is a huge blow to like artists. They have to get paid to do what they do, especially now where touring isn't as much of a big thing, like because of the pandemic. So they had to come up with some legislation that protected the artists and putting stuff out there. So like when you think of, oh, this is cynical, they're coming for streamers who are playing music. No, that's not why they made the law. Maybe it's how the law could be interpreted by somebody out there, but it's not like they're like, look, streamers, get all the streamers who are playing music. They're looking for those channels those individuals that are posting entire albums and straight up stealing music, and just posting on their page, making money off of it. People were legitimately monetizing channels by just putting a whole album that wasn't theirs on their channel because they knew people were going to search for it, right? Because that's how YouTube works, is you search for what you want to listen to. You search for what you want to watch. It's just like, it's Google. YouTube is the second largest search engine, second most used search engine in the world, right under Google, And so people are going to get on YouTube. They're going to look for their music. They're going to look for their stuff. So this is what DMCA is protecting against. So you do have people that are, they're releasing their music to streamers for free. And they're giving you written permission. I like Stream Beats too. Stream Beats provides some really cool music that you can just listen to. The other one I listen to on here quite frequently is Cookin' Soul. He has a whole playlist. But when you see an artist does that, like does some DMCA stuff, friendly stuff, like free, here you go, here have the music, don't assume that all their albums are DMCA friendly. You got to read. Look at it. Say, is it DMCA friendly? Are they explicitly saying this? So right here, they're explicitly saying that. I have this on recording now. It's captured. Shout out to every person who's on this list. This is amazing playlist, very high quality, and they gave it away. So that big fan. Because guess what? On Spotify, they're gonna get these spins. They're gonna get these views. They're gonna get these listens. So just throwing that out there, DMCA is a big deal. And I like to plug the artist.